Imagine you are the most wanted man on earth. You haven't left your apartment in over 2 years. You don't use a phone. You don't use a computer. You communicate with the outside world only through human couriers, men who carry your words in their memories, not on paper, not on screens. You are so careful, so invisible, that even the intelligence agencies of the most powerful nation on earth could not find a single photograph of your face for years. You are commanding a global terror network from a third-floor apartment in a sleepy Syrian village near the Turkish border. Your own neighbors have no idea who you are. And you think you are safe. You are not. Because 1,200 kilometers away, in a secure facility, people who have been watching you, studying you, for months, have built a physical tabletop model of your building. They know which floor you sleep on. They know you only leave your apartment to bathe on the roof. They have rehearsed the raid on your building dozens of times, and tonight, they are coming. Welcome. I'm your host, and today we are going inside one of the most extraordinary and most underreported special operations missions in modern history. The night Delta Force came for the ghost of ISIS. The night a man who commanded a global caliphate from a single room ran out of room to hide. This is Operation Atmeh, and almost nothing you've heard about it is the full story. Before we talk about the night of February 3rd, 2022, I need to tell you something about the man they were hunting. Because the official story will tell you he was just a terrorist leader. But the truth is far more layered than that, and far more disturbing. His real name was Amir Mohammed Saeed Abdal Rahman al-Mawla, born 1976 in Mosul, Iraq, son of an imam. He earned a master's degree in Quranic studies. He joined the jihadi movement in the mid-2000s, became a religious judge, a scholar of Islamic law, inside a terror organization. He had nicknames. The world called him Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi. But inside ISIS, he had 2 names that should give every thinking person goosebumps. They called him al-Ustad, the professor, and al-Hajjaj, the destroyer. But here is the secret that almost nobody talks about. In 2008, 14 years before this raid, American forces captured this man in Iraq. He was held. He was interrogated. And what happened next is almost unbelievable. While in U.S. custody, al-Mawla willingly gave up extremely detailed information about other ISIS members. Names, locations, operational details. Information that led to the death or arrest of at least 20 of his comrades. 20 people. One intelligence analyst described it this way, and I'm paraphrasing. It looked like he was getting rid of people he didn't like inside the ISIS command structure. He was playing the Americans, while eliminating his rivals. Then he was released in 2009. Think about that. The man who would one day become the supreme leader of ISIS, the man America would spend years and hundreds of millions of dollars hunting, was released by America. And we may have inadvertently helped him rise to power by eliminating his competitors. Before he became caliph, he was the architect of the Yazidi genocide. The United Nations formally classified what happened to the Yazidis as genocide, and al-Mawla wrote the religious rulings that made it permissible. He organized the distribution of thousands of Yazidi women and girls as sexual slaves. A former ISIS member testified, and this comes from CNN's reporting. The one who gave them the pact is al-Hajj Abdullah. He personally presided over the division of human beings as property. This is who they were hunting. Not just a figurehead, the theologian of atrocity. And when Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was killed by Delta Force in October 2019, in the same province, Idlib, ISIS named this man his successor within days. The ghost stepped forward, and then immediately disappeared again. For over 2 years, the supreme leader of a global terror network was effectively invisible. ISIS released no photographs of him, no audio messages, no video. He communicated only through couriers, never touching a phone or a computer. He never left his building. The intelligence community had almost nothing to work with. So how did they find him?
The answer reveals exactly how patient, how methodical, and how deeply layered American intelligence operations truly are. The CIA and partner agencies had been building what we call link analysis for years, a web of relationships, money movements, courier routes. You can't track the man, so you track the network around him. You follow the people who might know the people who know him. And you wait. By December 2021, U.S. commanders had become certain that al-Qurayshi was staying at a specific house in the village of Atmeh, near the Turkish border. That means the intelligence was being built up for months, possibly longer, before the final confirmation. Here is what the surveillance revealed, and this detail is stunning. This man, the supreme leader of ISIS, never left his apartment except to bathe on the roof. His building had 3 floors. The 3rd floor was his. The 2nd floor was occupied by one of his lieutenants, the man coordinating operations through the courier network, and that lieutenant's family. The 1st floor? Civilians, ordinary people, completely unaware they were living beneath the most wanted terrorist on Earth. He chose to hide among the most vulnerable people on the planet, Syrian families displaced by a decade of civil war, knowing full well their presence would complicate any military response. In December 2021, a physical tabletop model of the target building was brought into the White House Situation Room. President Biden's national security team studied that model. They rehearsed scenarios. They war-gamed every possible outcome. And then came the trigger. January 20th, 2022. Just 14 days before the raid. ISIS launched the largest military operation it had conducted since its territorial defeat. A massive, coordinated assault on the Ghawairan prison in Hasaka, Syria. Over 3,500 ISIS fighters were held there. Suicide bombers hit the gates. Armed fighters stormed the perimeter. An insurrection erupted inside. A nearby fuel depot exploded. The battle lasted 10 days. Hundreds were killed or wounded. American Bradley fighting vehicles had to be deployed. And intelligence confirmed that al-Qurayshi personally directed that attack. The man hiding on his 3rd-floor apartment was actively commanding a war in real time. He had just shown the world that ISIS was not finished. At that moment, the intelligence agencies told the White House, "We know where he is." The decision was made. They were going in. Now let's talk about something that most military coverage won't fully address: the political dimension. Every military action at this level is also a political action. And the timing, the decision-making, and the optics of this raid were not accidental. In August 2021, just 5 months before this raid, the world watched the United States withdraw from Afghanistan. What followed was described by the Pentagon's own generals as a planning failure. 13 American service members were killed at Abbey Gate in Kabul by a suicide bomber. The Taliban took the entire country within days. America's credibility on the world stage took a catastrophic blow. Allies questioned U.S. resolve. Adversaries took careful note. By February 2022, that credibility had not recovered. Russia was, at that very moment, massing troops on the Ukrainian border. The invasion would begin just 3 weeks after this raid. The Biden administration desperately needed to project strength, to send a signal to friends and enemies alike that American power was not diminished. And then the opportunity arrived. I am not saying this raid was politically motivated in terms of whether to conduct it. Al-Qurayshi was a legitimate, active, dangerous threat. He needed to be removed. But the timing of the announcement, the live feed in the Situation Room, the White House photo release showing the president and vice president watching the operation. These were deliberate strategic communications. This is America. We are still watching. We are still capable. Compare this to the Baghdadi raid in 2019 under President Trump.
Different president, same region, same type of target, same dramatic press conference. Both used the moment politically. This is not criticism. This is the reality of how democracies operate. Military success is political currency at the highest level. And there is another layer. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham came out and praised the operation, and immediately used it to argue for maintaining a continued U.S. troop presence in Syria. The operation was weaponized within hours in the debate over America's strategic role in the Middle East. For every military professional listening, understand this. Operations at this level are assessed not just by CENTCOM, not just by the Pentagon, but by the National Security Council, with one eye on the tactical outcome and one eye on the strategic narrative. That is the world we operate in. February 3rd, 2022, 1 o'clock hours local time, northwest Syria. The darkness before dawn. Approximately 50 Delta Force operators, members of the most elite and secretive combat unit in the United States military, supported by elements of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, lift off from an undisclosed location. These are the men who fly where no one else will fly. They train year-round for exactly this. They have done it before, in this same province, against this same type of target. The flight to Atmeh is long. The helicopters are moving deep into hostile airspace. Territory controlled by Turkish-backed Syrian rebel groups, monitored by Russian air defense systems, patrolled by al-Qaeda-linked fighters. The U.S. had to quietly coordinate, without sharing operational details, with Russia, Turkey, and regional partners to ensure American aircraft were not engaged. Think about that diplomatic tightrope being walked at the same moment operators are strapping in. In the hours before the raid, open-source flight tracking data showed multiple surveillance drones circling the villages north of Atmeh. Eyes in the sky feeding real-time intelligence back to operators on the ground and commanders in Washington. The helicopters land. Operators move to position around the 3-story building surrounded by olive trees in the fields outside Atmeh. And then they do something that separates this mission from how most people imagine special operations raids. They pick up loudspeakers. In Arabic, they call out to the building. Come out. Civilians, evacuate. Women and children, leave now. This is called a tactical call-out, a doctrine developed and refined through hard experience in the Iraq War. You give civilians a way out. You assess how the target responds. You learn what is happening inside before you enter. And you protect the innocent even when the mission is lethal. The family on the first floor, the civilians who had no idea the most wanted man on earth was living above them, they walk out into the night. They are safe. The building goes silent. And then, the third floor explodes. Al-Qurayshi, just as his predecessor Baghdadi had done in this same province 3 years earlier, detonates a bomb. Not a small vest. An explosion so powerful it destroys the entire third floor and blows bodies outside the building into the surrounding area. Residents across the village described the blast as if the sky had split open. The shockwave was felt throughout Atmeh. His wife, his children, gone. Killed by the man who was supposed to protect them. Stop and think about this pattern. 2 ISIS leaders, same province, same outcome, 3 years apart. Both men, when faced with the arrival of actual consequence, when real power knocked on the door, chose to murder their own families rather than face a courtroom. What does that tell you about this ideology? What does it tell you about men who build movements on the promise of divine paradise, and then detonate their children the moment justice arrives? The battle continues. The lieutenant on the second floor, the man who coordinated al-Qurayshi's communication with the outside world through the courier network, is still alive. He barricades himself and his wife and engages Delta operators in a sustained firefight. That fight lasts close to 2 hours. 2 hours of close-quarters combat in a residential building, in darkness, in a village in northwest Syria. The operators neutralized the threat.
Outside, one of the American helicopters suffers a significant mechanical failure. It lands safely. The crew evacuates. And in a decision that shows exactly the caliber of discipline these men operate with, they destroy their own aircraft on the ground. They will not leave American military technology, sensors, classified electronics, in hostile territory for adversaries to exploit. They blow it up. They leave nothing. DNA and fingerprints are taken from al-Qurayshi's remains. Confirmed. All 50 American operators return home. 0 American casualties. Now I need to talk about what the official statements glossed over. The Pentagon said 5 combatants and 4 civilians were killed. The White Helmets, the Syrian civil defense first responders on the ground, reported 13 people killed, including 6 children and 4 women. UNICEF confirmed at least 6 children were dead and 1 girl was severely injured. 13 people. 6 children. President Biden correctly stated that al-Qurayshi's own detonation caused those civilian deaths. The man surrounded his family in a building, then pulled the trigger on a massive explosion. That is on him. That is not disputed. But a serious military professional must also ask, was there a better way? The administration chose a ground raid over an airstrike specifically to reduce civilian casualties. That choice reflects moral seriousness. An airstrike would have been faster and safer for American forces, but the potential for mass civilian death in a populated residential building was unacceptable. That decision was correct. Here is the question that was never publicly answered. Intelligence confirmed that al-Qurayshi went to the building's roof to bathe. Every single day. He was alone on that roof, isolated, away from his family, away from the civilians below. Was that window, that daily routine on the rooftop, ever considered as an exploitation point? A small team, a sniper, an approach that removes the threat without the collateral risk? That question, as far as the public record shows, was never addressed. Could a smaller, covert team have reached that rooftop? Possibly. But then you would not have had the force strength to handle a sustained 2-hour firefight with an armed lieutenant on the 2nd floor. The planners assessed the threat correctly. The force size was justified. But the deeper question, the one that should be at the center of every after-action review, is this. Why was the world's most wanted terrorist living in a building above civilians for over 2 years? Who owns that building? Who arranged his protection in Idlib? What network shielded him? Who were his protectors? And why has that network never been publicly identified or held accountable? And the most uncomfortable question of all. The United States held this man in 2008. Our interrogators spoke with him. Our analysts assessed him. Something in that process, some gap in methodology, some political constraint, some failure of evaluation, led to his release. And he went on to become the supreme leader of the most dangerous terror organization in the world, and the architect of a genocide. That has never been publicly reviewed. It should be. Not to assign blame, but because the only way institutions improve is by honestly examining where they failed. So what did this operation actually accomplish? Tactically, a major terror leader was removed from the battlefield. The man who had personally directed the Hasaka prison siege, the man who coordinated ISIS's global operations through a courier network from his apartment, he is gone. His lieutenant, the operational brain between the caliph and the outside world, is also gone. That is genuine, measurable degradation of the network. Strategically, ISIS named a new leader within months. The organization did not collapse. It never does with leadership strikes alone. After Baghdadi's death, the Defense Intelligence Agency concluded that his loss would not have an immediate impact on ISIS's operational capacity. The same analysis applies here. ISIS continues to operate today, in Syria, in Iraq, in Africa, and in the minds of individuals it inspires to act alone in Western cities. Politically, the administration got its moment. The Situation Room photograph, the press conference, the declaration that America's reach is unlimited.
For an administration battered by Afghanistan and facing an escalating crisis in Europe, this was exactly the narrative reset they needed. For the Yazidi people, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Nadia Murad, a survivor of ISIS's systematic rape and enslavement, released a statement when al-Qurayshi was killed. She said the international community's apathy had left her community with little hope for justice and accountability. Over 200,000 Yazidis remain displaced to this day. The women who were enslaved did not get a trial.
They did not get to look the man in the eye across a courtroom.
They got a press conference announcing a bomb. That is the truth that should sit with all of us. The real cost of this operation was paid not by Americans. It was paid by 6 Syrian children who died in a residential building because a man who claimed to lead a religious movement chose to destroy his own family. And by the Yazidi survivors who had a right to see their tormentor face justice. There is a version of this story where everything went right, where America reached into the darkness, found the most wanted man on earth, and removed him. Where trained professionals executed a near impossible mission under hostile conditions with 0 American casualties. Where a helicopter that failed was destroyed before adversaries could exploit it. Where a family on the first floor walked out alive into the Syrian night. That story is true. And there is another version,
where a man America once held in its own custody rose to lead a global terror network. Where he hid for 2 years among people displaced by a war the world had forgotten. Where the intelligence to find him required months of invisible, dangerous, patient work by people whose names will never be spoken in public. Where 6 children died in a building because the man who was supposed to protect them chose ideology over their lives. Where thousands of Yazidi survivors are still waiting for a justice that a bomb on a 3rd floor cannot deliver. That story is also true. The best military operations are never clean. They are the result of extraordinary courage, extraordinary intelligence, and the hard, honest acceptance that even when you do everything right, someone pays a cost you cannot fully control. The operators of Delta Force and the Night Stalkers who flew into hostile territory that night and came home with every single one of their people, they deserve to be remembered. The 6 children of Atmeh who did not see the morning, they also deserve to be remembered.
That is what it means to understand war honestly. Not with cheerleading, not with propaganda, but with the full, undiminished weight of what it costs and what it means. Thank you for listening. Stay sharp, stay informed, and never stop asking the questions that others are afraid to ask.